Hi everybody, this is Michael Hildebrandt and I'm your host on the Sleeptrust podcast, where I'm talking about how to gain back trust in your ability to have a superb sleep again.
In this week's episode of the Sleeptrust podcast, we are going to talk about anger. And clearly it is not really helpful to be angry if you're lying in bed. Thoughts are kind of going through your head and you get this tense feeling that you just want to walk through walls. But on the other side, anger is a feeling and all feelings, all emotions are kind of there to serve us. So we should admit that anger has its positive sides. And this is kind of how I started off doing the research to this week's episode. I had a story in mind, and of course, the story is not about how good anger is for us, but rather the opposite. And that's why I usually do the research, looking for people who have a complete different opinion. And doing so, I stumbled over a TED Talk that had the title of Why Anger is Actually Good for Us, something like that, from a guy called Ryan Martin. And he's actually the chair of the psychology department at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And he's nationally known as an anger expert. So I thought, that's interesting. Listen to what he has to say to us. Of course, the real reason why I'm picking stuff out of this TED Talk is that he at some point mentioned the Incredible Hulk. And I had planned to take the Incredible Hulk as a picture for this podcast episode, which I decided to not do in the end. But I'm going to link the TED Talk to this episode. And you can have a look at that if you research Ryan Martin, or just go into the show notes of this week's episode at sleeptrust.eu and you'll get the link there. So what he basically says is that anger actually can make us really strong, and it's a super important emotion if we're in kind of a fight and flight situation. So I think he comes up with a zebra or something like that. And if a lion chases the zebra, it's good for the zebra to be angry about the lion, so it'll kick it or try to kick it, or even better, run away. It's definitely going to give the zebra power to do something, to act. But the big difference between what used to happen and what happens now is that actually after the situation is cleared, the anger is gone because the zebra moved, it ran a kilometer or something like that. And after that, the situation is settled, the emotion is gone. As we can't live our anger in the way that we used to do, probably, 1,000 years from now, we would just, or a couple of thousand years from now, we would just have, if we gotten angry, we would just have gotten into a fight. And that would have been it. The result would have been what it would have been. Maybe people would have been injured. Maybe people would have died. Maybe we would have died ourselves. But in the end, the emotion would have been settled through an action, including moving your body in a certain way and getting a result. But today, the anger just seems to be nagging thoughts, and this is stressing our bodies. And this is also the point where we're going to the negative aspects and the aspects that can really harm our sleep. So let's say we've got a situation today where somebody treated us unfair or did things to us that harmed us, and now we're getting angry. So what we can't do is, at least we shouldn't do, go to that person and kind of punch him into the face or something like that. And it's hard for us to just talk to people, or often it's hard for us to talk to people and just settle things like that and say, see, what you said to me was unfair, it hurt, even though it's the best way. And there are people out there where you just can't do it because they're kind of too ignorant. So the only thing that we can do to cope with our anger is to work on ourselves. This is the most powerful tool. So the anger is only an emotion, and it's bound to a situation that we do the interpretation on and that we kind of give the meaning. So the best way to actually work with this anger is to try to get conscious about it. What I personally do is that I get conscious in the form that I tell myself, okay, it's no worth in me getting angry about something if I'm not going to take any kind of action. So it's just me being angry. The other person might not even know or not even care, even worse. So he or she is feeling good. I'm feeling bad. I'm worth to feel good now too. That's what I wish to myself. So there's no point in continuing to being angry against the person. But this is only the first step. This is the, I would say, self-love, self-respect, and self-protect step to say I'm not going to be angry if the other person is feeling well. And the second step is far more powerful, but also, especially in the beginning, if you're not really used to doing so, kind of hard to do, because it's about forgiveness, forgiving people for what they did to us, releasing the anger, releasing the hate, releasing everything that's in us, and just forgiving the people for what they did to us. And this is the one best thing that you can really do. If you feel that this is completely familiar to you, then you probably experienced this and had good experiences and say, okay, yeah, that's true. But for I think many people out there that are listening to this right now, the concept may be a little bit strange in the beginning because you say he or she doesn't deserve to give my forgiveness. And in the beginning, I would just try to think about that you deserve to forgive them, because in the moment you practice forgiveness to others, you release the anger, the hate, all those bad emotions. You just set them free, and you're worth to do that. So maybe think of it like that you say you're doing it for yourself. You're forgiving others, but in reality, you're going to feel better. And to do so, there are different techniques, really good techniques that you can use to forgive others. The way I do it is I simply have it built into my morning routine even. That's after I do my gratitude practice. It's a send love technique. So I think about all the people that I love and send love out. And if there are people, so that's not, forgiveness. It's just think about people you really love and sending out your love and getting connected. But I kind of flip people in between where I know I'm a little bit tense. It's not, I wouldn't put any people I'm really hardcore angry about in there, but it's kind of if you get this little tense feeling about people, not letting it build up and right away tackling it through sending them love. And that way I just feel more connected to them. And the next time I'll talk to them, it'll be easier for me to tell them what I like and what I didn't like. That's a really good thing. And I do it every morning. So you may want to practice that. And a really powerful technique, a meditation technique to release anger is the Ho'oponopono. That's what it's called. It's an Hawaiian meditation technique where you walk through 4 simple steps, or it's kind of an affirmation mantra thing. It's I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I thank you. It's these 4 steps. And you just go on, continue these 4 steps, think about the person and say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I thank you, I love you, or the other way around. It doesn't really matter that much. At least in my practice, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes I even mix them up to kind of get a different order into this and not to make it too automatic. So I'm going to link a good Ho'oponopono meditation to this week's episode. You will find it in the show notes at sleeptrust.eu too, so check it out. I'm even thinking of doing an own version of the Ho'oponopono. At the moment, it's just a little bit a time thing. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do it right away or if you're going to get that down the road, so in a couple of weeks or a couple of months time. But I think this meditation is just so fantastic. I'm definitely gonna make an own version. I want to close this week's episode picking up on the Incredible Hulk again. I kind of assume that we all know him, but I'm sure we do not all know him. So the Incredible Hulk is a figure, I think it's a Marvel figure that is a man, and as soon as somebody gets him angry, he kind of mutates into this green, strong guy who just would walk through a restaurant and rip everything apart. What happens then is that he usually calms down after he destroyed everything, wakes up somewhere. And by the way, I think, talking about that, I think he wakes up, so he falls asleep somewhere, and when he wakes up, he's normal again. If you know anything about that, please drop me an email or leave something in the Facebook comments to this week's episode. That would be great. That way I don't have to do the research on that. I'm kind of sure he falls asleep somewhere and then he's normal again. So, but what is certainly clear is that when he gets up, he does not feel good about what he did. And when he does it, he's not under control about it. So the angrier you get, the more you tend to do stuff that you would maybe not do if you had a clear head on your mind. So it's not the best advisor, especially nowadays. It's better to get clear and take a conscious, good decision on what to act on. And that's basically how I want to close up this week's episode. So let's wrap up this week's episode of the Sleep Trust podcast together. Anger, as any other emotion, is there to serve us. If we're in a fight or flight kind of situation, anger might be that one powerful emotion that we want to have to make us brave and strong in that situation. Anger over longer periods of time will hurt our bodies, it will make us stressed, and stress is a bad thing in particular, but not only if we want to fall asleep. So we want to release anger through forgiveness, and this will not only include forgiving other people, but also ourselves for things that we may have done. To do so, a good technique is the Ho'oponopono meditation. I'm going to put a link into the show notes of this week's episode at sleeptrust.eu. So please check it out and use it to release your anger and get calm and, of course, to get a superb sleep again. And that's it for this week's episode of the Sleep Trust podcast. I hope you enjoyed yourself and that you tune in next week when we're going to talk about naps. Until then, have a superb sleep.
Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Sleep Trust podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want to get further information on this podcast or material that will help you to gain back your sleep trust, please check out sleeptrust.eu. That's sleeptrust.eu, where you will get lots of information around sleep. And here comes some legal stuff. Everything on this podcast is my opinion only, so do not take it as an advice, as I am not a doctor, nor have I considered your personal situation. If you feel that you need medical advice, please consider getting an appointment at your doctor of trust. If you want to give me any kind of feedback on this podcast, feel free to email me at podcast@sleeptrust.eu. I hope you tune in again next week, and until then, have a good sleep.